So let's begin with the definition. Deductive reasoning is using a set of facts to reach a conclusion, and that conclusion will also be a fact. Note that your conclusion will always be true. As you may recall, when we discussed inductive reasoning in the last section, we made a note that the conclusion could be true or it could be false, and that either scenario was okay. With deductive reasoning, your conclusion has to be true. Let's look at a few examples. So our first example says that Kirby lives in North Dakota and that North Dakota is part of the United States. So these statements are our facts. And this is the conclusion that we're drawing. So if we know that Kirby lives in North Dakota, and we know that North Dakota is part of the United States, is it true and a logical conclusion that Kirby is a resident of the United States? And yes, since that is true, then we can say that this is an example of deductive reasoning. A similar example. Again, they're going to give us two facts here, and we want to look at this conclusion. So our facts are that all living creatures require water to survive. We also know that tigers are living creatures. So is it true that tigers will require water to survive? And since that is a true statement, and it's a logical conclusion based on our facts, then this is an example of deductive reasoning. Another example. Given x is equal to a and a is equal to 7. So these are our facts. This is our conclusion. So if I know that x is equal to a and a is equal to 7, is it true that x must equal 7? And since this is a true statement, and it's a logical conclusion based on our initial facts, then this is an example of deductive reasoning. Again, the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning lies in your conclusion. In inductive reasoning, your conclusion could be true or it could be false. But in deductive reasoning, your conclusion is always true. So we want to consider some examples and determine whether we are looking at inductive or deductive reasoning. So our first example says that Carrie made 9 out of 12 free throws in the opening basketball game of the season. Okay, that is our fact. Our conclusion is, therefore, she will make 45 out of 60 free throws over the next 5 games. So we want to ask ourselves, is that conclusion, is it a definite true statement? Or is it possible that that conclusion could be false? Just because she made 9 out of 12 free throws in the first game does not necessarily mean that she's going to make 45 out of 60 over the next 5 games. So since it's possible that this is false, we're going to say that this is an example of inductive reasoning. Let's look at our next example. All ducks can swim. Daffy is a duck. Those are my initial conditions. Those are my facts. Therefore, Daffy can swim. So look at your conclusion. Is your conclusion a true statement based on the two initial facts? If all ducks can swim and we know that Daffy is a duck, then does that mean that Daffy can swim? Yes. And since we have a definite true statement based on our initial two facts, we are looking at a deductive reasoning type example. Let's look at a couple of other examples. Harold is a grandfather. Harold is bald. Therefore, all grandfathers are bald. So I know that Harold is a grandfather and that Harold is bald. Does that mean that all grandfathers are bald? No, of course not. Therefore, this is an example of inductive reasoning because our statement is false. Remember that inductive reasoning could have a conclusion that is true or it could have a conclusion that is false. What about the next one? All dolphins are mammals. All mammals have kidneys. Is it true then that all dolphins have kidneys? And yes, you can see that if we consider the first two statements as facts, then it follows logically that the third statement is also true. So this is an example of deductive reasoning. All right, one more set of examples. These two are similar. One will be inductive and one will be deductive. We want to be sure that we can tell the difference. So the first one says that Max is a shelter dog. Max is happy. Our conclusion is that all shelter dogs are happy. So we know that Max is a shelter dog and we know that Max is happy. Does that mean that all shelter dogs are happy? Not necessarily. And since my conclusion could be false, then I have a situation where we have inductive reasoning. Okay, what about the last one? Max is a shelter dog. All shelter dogs are happy. Does that mean that Max is happy? Yes. If we treat the first two statements as facts, Max is a shelter dog and all shelter dogs are happy, it's a logical conclusion that Max is happy. And since our conclusion is true, then we're going to say that this is an example of deductive reasoning.